Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Visualizing Innovation, Creating Digital Brains for Analysis and Action. My name is Matt Caton, and I am joined on today's webinar by Jay Ofemi.
Hello, everyone. We got some pretty cool content to share with you today, and a few example brains that I think are also very cool. So can't wait to get into it.
Yes, thanks everyone for joining. We're really excited about the brains that we're going to be demoing. And we'll give you the history and the idea behind each individual brain as we go. And at the end of the demo, we're going to demo 3 different brains with you today. And at the end of the demo, we'll sort of roll back and talk about features that we utilized within the brain application to create these brains, and features that we really rely upon and are going to become useful, more and more useful over time. Now, I'll start out by saying you can actually download the 3 different brains that we are demoing today from our website at the very top banner of thebrain.com. In fact, I'll bring up our website on the screen now. Very top banner, Visualizing Innovation with information about today's webinar. You can actually click, scroll down, and see that we've got electric vehicles, aviation, and space innovation. These brains are available for you to download. So if you want to go ahead and start downloading now and click along as we demo, you certainly can. Or after the demo, you see that one of these brains is particularly interesting to you, feel free to return back to this page and download the brain that we demo today and continue on using it. You know, technology isn't going to stop today on what's going on with electric vehicles or what's going on in space innovation. Elon Musk is going to release a new car next week and probably fly into space as well. So all these brains will be getting updated over time, or you can download them and add your own content that's important to you. So those will always be available there for you. And without further ado, I'm actually going to hand things over to Jay Ofemi, who is the mastermind, the brain behind the Space Brain. And he'll take you on a tour of the Space Brain that I have on the screen right now. And so Jay, I'm gonna hand controls over to you.
Great.
There we go, Jay. Sorry about the delay there.
No worries. Let me just make sure that I'm sharing the correct screen here.
Yeah, I see your list of available brains there.
Brains here. Okay, perfect. Can you only see that one screen? Can't see my other monitor.
I see all the thumbnails, all the brain thumbnails in a row. Great.
Yeah. All right, great. Yeah, thanks for joining us, guys. I usually like to start on my brain list page here just to show off a few of my of my thumbnails. And you know, that's just how I like to pretty much start presenting my brain, because a lot of people don't. There are some features in the brain that a lot of people don't really utilize that much, maybe because they don't know that they're there. But you know, this is one of them where you can your wallpaper will usually be the same as your brain thumbnail, so it's quick. You can use it to quickly identify a brain in your brain list and you know, go into it. So without further ado, let's get into the Space Brain here. And right off the bat, so this is my home thought, which is Earth. And right off the bat, you will notice something that's different about this brain, which is the fact that most brains that we create, the sort of like the name of the brain is usually the top level layer thought, and everything just kind of branches out from under that. And there's nothing wrong with that, because in fact, when most people use the brain to gather information, they're typically doing research or something like that, something on sort of like the serious end where it's sort of professional and you need to keep notes organized and things like that. And that works for a lot of cases. But for this brain, I wanted it to just be a little bit different, such that it's more graphically engaging, such that we're using mostly just features that I highlighted on the Plex and barely really touching the content section. So a lot of people will create a thought and use the content section as where they would typically write notes and things like that. But for this brain, we wanted to really just sort of show the power of the Plex. So I myself am a huge video gamer, and one thing I've noticed about a lot of video games that I play is that right off the bat, the first thing that you sort of interact with, in fact, the main thing you interact with in a lot of these games is the map. And the map is usually just a bunch of icons, a bunch of things like that. It's not something that will explain exactly what you're looking at. So usually the thing that most designers and people who work on these games do, they make sure that the map is just like as intuitive as possible. You can look at it for maybe 2 minutes and you should be able to understand what you're looking at. So that's sort of what I wanted to sort of show in this brain, where we can use things like link labels and thought labels and things like that to just show what we're looking at before we even go into the content section at all. In fact, this brain could be explored just using the Plex. So, and that's sort of like the goal that we wanted to accomplish here. So yeah, we'll start here on Earth, which is my home thought. We have information at the bottom here that's related to the active thought. So this right here, the main thought that you can see on the Plex is the active thought, and the children thought are just information that's related to that. So I will say, actually, before I start clicking around, I have a unique perspective because of my position in the company, where I'm able to learn about how the technicals of the brain work, so like how the brain works on a technical level, but also fortunate to hear some of the feedback from users as far as like questions and general comments and features and things like that they want to see. But I think one of the main questions that we get often is, especially for people who are still sort of new to the brain, is how do I start my brain? Like, they have the information they want to put in a brain, but they're not sure how to sort of build it out. They're not sure how to even start, which thoughts should be child thoughts, which thoughts should be parent thoughts, and things like that. And to me, normally I would just give them the answer of, well, uh, that's kind of trivial. You can do that anyhow you want. You can start with whatever thought, you can branch out into the children however you want, and then you can just make changes as you go. And in most cases, that will work perfectly. Depending on the information that you're trying to present or that you're trying to gather, though, in a brain, sometimes that information already tells you how to build the brain, such as like this one here, where the main goal of this brain was to sort of show human innovation in space. But to me, it made sense to start on a level such that my topmost layer is the sun. And the reason for that is because if you look at all the missions that humans have sent out into space, I mean, all the missions that we've gone and sent out, rockets into space, we've never, I mean, the farthest rocket that we have right now in space, so if we go into this interstellar thought right here, is the Voyager 1, I believe. Yep, right here in the notes. So the Voyager 1 has not reached the closest star system to the sun, or is not even anywhere near that. So to me, it makes sense to make the sun my topmost layer here, because really we haven't explored anything outside of the star system, outside of the sun. So outside of the solar system, I should say. So this makes sense to me. And in whenever I get that question where it's like, how should I start my brain? I almost want to immediately reply, well, maybe you should get more information, because if you have all the information you need, it's usually just sort of clear how you should structure a brain. So for this example, though, kind of like I said, our missions outside, our missions into space and where we've gotten to, what we've explored, was really what I focused on. And I was like, all right, this is exactly how I'm going to build this brain, because that's the information that we have. So to go back to how I wanted this brain to be really just visually spectacular, I tried to include a lot of things like link labels, link types, thought labels, and we'll go over a few of those features as we sort of run into thoughts that use them in this brain. So first of all, though, I started on Earth, and it kind of like I said, even for this presentation, it made sense for where I should start and how I should build it up, because we were first on Earth and we explored the Earth, and then we sent missions to the moon, and from there we explored further into different planets in the solar system. So it made sense to me that that's how we should sort of follow through this brain. So if we're starting on Earth here, like I said, the children thoughts are information about the Earth, or things that are found on Earth, or objects that are currently orbiting the Earth. So this is just generally things that are related to the Earth. And we can start at this thought here, because it actually highlights a feature that I want to, or it uses a feature that I wanted to highlight here, which part of making this brain so visually spectacular was I wanted each thought to have some sort of visual that you can use to quickly recognize it, or quickly just know what you're looking at without, like I said, needing to go into like if you activated one of these thoughts here, it does have information in the notes, but really the goal here was to make it so you don't have to activate one of those thoughts. So here you have this 25 strangest sites on Google Earth. You can just see this says alien bunker, and you can hover over the picture, the icon, and the image it's a zoomable icon. So the image will zoom in a little bit and you can see exactly what the alien bunker, what the image is talking about. So for each one of these, you can literally just kind of go down the list and hover over each icon to sort of get a pretty good idea of what each thought is saying. So the thought is just a general description of the image, really. So for a context like this, you shouldn't need to activate a thought, come back here, activate a thought, come back here. You can just hover over each one to get a better idea. And so that was one of those features that we thought was going to be really useful for a brain like this, where a lot of the power of this brain is in the plex. And you can see right here as well. Okay, so we just covered a few things about the Earth, and if we go over to the moon here, then you start to see some of the missions that we've gone on to the moon, and there are quite a few of these, but I will just activate Apollo 11 real quick, because it helps me make sort of an example of how interconnected this brain is. We wanted it such that, so the brain has a back button here that you can use to go back to the last thought that you were on. But if your brain is built out well and really well connected, then you really shouldn't need to use the back button. You should be able to just continuously click on thoughts to end up in different parts of your brain that you would like to be in. And thoughts should sort of just lead to other thoughts that will help you to get to those different parts of your brain. Now, that's not necessary, but I felt like that was important for this brain, because really it will help, like all the information will just be extremely connected, and it will help to really just bring up the point that this brain is trying to make, which is, humans in space and all this cool information about like space exploration and things like that. So let me just quickly go back to Earth here real quick. I just wanted to point out some of the link types that I'm using in this brain. So if you take a look at one of the missions, so this is just an example of a mission, and we do have a few of these, but you can see that, first of all, you can see that once it's activated, there's just a whole bunch of thoughts on the plex. And to someone who might be sort of new to the brain, this might seem a little convoluted. You're looking at it thinking, all right, well, there's a lot of information here. But if you just sort of focus on the active thought here, in fact, if you hover over the active thought, most of the information that's here will already become apparent. Like you will already be able to see, just using the link labels and the link types and things like that, you can see why this is linked to the moon, because there was a crewed lander mission that was taken to the moon, and it's linked to Saturn V because this is, and if you're not sure why it's linked to Saturn V, you hover over it and you can see that this has a thought label that says rockets, and it has a few tags as well to sort of give you further information about that rocket. And this is just the operating company, I should say. or the operators on the mission. So, you know, the way everything is kind of laid out, it gives you a lot of information just by looking at this one context. Like, you don't have to click around to fully find out why this is linked here or why this is linked there. And with, I mean, you can already see in this context how the links are sort of taking some pretty interesting shapes. I was actually surprised. I mean, I've created lots of brains over the years, but I was actually surprised to see some of the link shapes that were taking place in this brain, because like I said, we tried to make sure that the brain was well interconnected. So sometimes you activate a thought and some of the links are just kind of crazy how they look. But even with that, you know, even with a bunch of links and a bunch of thoughts showing up in any given context, it was important for us to make sure that you simply hovering over one of the thoughts should give you enough information for you to see why this thought is in this context. And for things like crewed missions here, I just have the crew at the bottom as child thoughts of the mission. So, and that's the sort of formula I tried to follow for this brain entirely, which was create a thought, and then everything about that thought would go as a child. Everything related to that thought would go as a jump, and then things that are sort of, so for example, like a mission, any given mission. So let's click on Luna 2 here. You'll see that the operator is the parent thought, and the rocket is the parent thought, and that just makes sense. And the destination as well is a parent thought. And then anything that, so for Luna 2 here, I didn't really have any information I wanted to highlight, but usually any information that I want to highlight about the mission itself would be children thoughts. And then jump thoughts are really just, you know, you can go either way with jump thoughts. So for jump thoughts here, I decided to do the launch year for these missions. So if you actually click on one of the launch years, you can see that we have quite a few of them. We actually have a whole timeline of now I don't want to say every single space mission, because I'm sure there were some that we might have missed, but quite a few space missions are here in the timeline. So that's one way that you can sort of explore this in sort of like a linear timeline way, or you can just click on the mission thought type, and you can see that we do have quite a few missions here, from you know, orbiters around the Earth to missions to the moon to missions to Mars and things like that. And speaking of Mars, I would actually like to activate the Mars thought here. And a lot of you might be familiar with the Mars 2020 mission. It's probably the mission that's making the news most these days. And we have actually, okay, so this is great. One thing I wanted to point out as well. So for Mars 2020, you know, this is a mission that it had the Perseverance rover and the Ingenuity helicopter in it. But normally, I think before actually, we just had this thought that said Perseverance here, and that was the mission. But I feel like it would be better if we sort of flesh things out a little bit more and just gave you more detail about the Mars 2020 mission as a whole. So now I'm sort of breaking it down into multiple, I guess I would say multiple sub missions. Well, that's the same mission, but still. But what I like to do whenever there's a child thought that I think is super important and it's sort of mixed in with a whole bunch of other thoughts here is we just add a color to the background of it. And it makes you, it automatically just draws your focus, because once you activate this thought, really probably the first three things you will click are these three thoughts that are color coded. And that's exactly what we wanted when you enter this context. So I'm just going to quickly click on the Ingenuity thought here. And here's another cool feature of the brain where so as you can already see, a lot of my thoughts here are just the websites themselves. So I do a little bit of research on these topics. And like I said, I try to include the information that I find in the Plex, but the website itself, or a way that someone who's looking at this, who wants to pursue more information about this, can find it, I try to include that in the content section. So here it might just be one website, it might be the NASA website where you can find more information about it. Yeah, I might even include a few notes, but for most of these, I'm just including simply the website. And the brain has a built-in embedded browser such that the website can display right in the brain, and you don't have to actually click on the website to go into your browser, although you can do that if you want to. So that's actually a pretty neat feature where for all of these, if you're looking at something in the Plex and sure it makes sense, but you want to see more information about it, you activate it, and most likely there'll be a website here where you can really just kind of read more about it. And also it should play, embedded videos as well. So that's a 1 minute video. I'm not gonna play that whole thing, but some of these videos are pretty cool, especially the Ingenuity first flight video here. This is actually pretty long too, but yeah, not very eventful, but I think that's pretty cool. And in any case, so we've tried to sort of make it very clear what you're looking at in the Plex, and make it such that whenever you're going through a brain like this, you're thinking, oh, okay, this makes sense why this is connected here. This makes sense why this is linked here. But I want more information about it. You can just look on the right side here. You can see any kind of information we might have added, or you can just click on the open. So this icon here that I clicked is just open, and it simply just opened that same article in my web browser, so I can pursue further information on this if I wanted, and things like that. So with that said, I think there's another, let me just quickly glance at my notes here. I think that was another feature that I wanted to touch on. Right. So if I go back to my home thought here, one of the ways that we were really able to make this brain, really look good in the Plex and also give you information without having to use the content section is by really just explaining why something is linked to another thing. And the way we do that is either a link label or a link type. And it's not absolutely necessary, but in a lot of cases, if you're looking at the Plex and you're not sure why something is connected to something else, just adding a link label or a link type will make that very clear. And I mean, a lot of the brain users actually don't know that the links themselves, essentially you can add attachments and notes and things to the links that will sort of explain why that link is there. So for a simple example here is just for each one of these planets or asteroids or comets or whatever, I link them to the sun, but for each link I add the distance in AU, in astronomical units, from the sun to that object. So you might be looking at this and you're not really sure why they're there, but if you look at the Earth one, it says 1 AU, and if you click on that, it pretty much explains why these are there. So I think that's something that's really that feature there. So what I just explained there were link labels. These are labels that I just clicked on a link and simply added to. So something like example, right? And those are perfect for this example that I just gave here, where for each one of these, they're not going to be the same distance. Maybe they might be, but in most cases they won't be. So it would make sense to create a link type for them. But for something like this orbiter type that you're seeing here, this is actually a link type, although it's not very clear that there's a difference between link labels and link types. The clear difference is that we use orbiter quite a lot. And with other link types as well, such as launch year. I showed you the missions, they were linked to the years that they were launched. So that helps us to use these, I should say, link labels in such a way where we don't have to type in the label every single time. So for something like that, a link label that you're going to be using a lot, you create a link type for it, and that way you can just simply click on the link type to add that label and any other attributes you might have added to to that link. So you can make a link directional, you can make it one way. Those might be a little bit more advanced, but even still, you know, I would recommend playing around with this and seeing what you can sort of accomplish with that whenever you're building up a brain. I've seen a lot of brain examples in the past where, you know, it's a great brain, but it doesn't, I constantly have to check in the content section to see more information about things. Meanwhile, if there was just more information added on the Plex, I feel like that would not be needed. So that's something that we really try to accomplish with this brain, and I think that we've done just that. So, and yeah, like I said, every single thought here has a zoomable icon. So that helps you to sort of just go through all of these thoughts without really needing to click on any one of them, and get a pretty decent feel for what you're looking at, get a pretty decent, you know, feel for what this brain is really trying to show you. And with that, I believe, oh, you know what? Let me just, Matt, before you jump in here, let me just go and show, let me just show quickly the Starship thought, which I
Sure,
thought.
go right ahead.
Very quickly as well, I will talk about the rockets type. So I created some thought types here to pretty much make categorizations more simple. And you know, for many of you who might have used the brain before, you sort of know how thought types work. But if you haven't before, it's pretty much, you know, a thought can have multiple tags, which are these icons that you can see attached at the bottom right of each thought. But a thought can only have one type. So for this, you can kind of see a good example of that here, where all of these thoughts are of type rockets, and they also inherit the attributes such as the red background and the white text. But each one of them have multiple tags, and the tags can describe maybe the status of the rocket or the country where the rocket was made and things like that. So that's a pretty good way of categorization in the brain. But specifically, a rocket I want to talk about that I'm excited about is the Starship rocket. And some of you might have been following this in the news in recent days with SN, I believe SN15 was the last one, yep. But here, again, this is where I try to use thought labels and the zoomable icons to really just tell the story. So you shouldn't need to activate any one of these thoughts. You can just hover over it to see what happened and to get a quick description of what happened. So SN1 blew up during the pressure test. SN2 passed the pressure test, which you can sort of see here. SN3 failed due to bad commanding. And if you actually, so this one might be a little still, you might still be a little confused as far as what is bad commanding, and you can activate that. And you know, like I said, we've added a website where you can sort of read more about these things. So you can go in here. Apparently it was just as it says, bad commanding that caused that to fail, not any technical issue. And we got SN4 here, which exploded after the rocket engine test, and you can sort of see a cool picture of that. We got SN5, which was the first successful test flight, and you can see a picture of that there as well. And they all still look like grain silos at this point. And then we have SN6, which is also another successful test flight. SN7, which was purposefully destroyed in the pressure test, and you can see that there. We have SN8, which was the first belly flop maneuver. I couldn't find a good picture of the belly flop maneuver, but you can see SN8 soaring through the skies there. We have SN9, which crashed during the landing, and you can sort of see right before the disaster picture here. We have SN10, which successfully landed and then exploded, and you can see the explosion there. We have SN11, which exploded on descent. SN11 was a really foggy day, so they didn't have a really good picture, or I couldn't find a good picture online of that, but here's a picture before it took off. So, and then SN15, which is the first successful landing, which is actually quite something to behold. We have a small video of it here, or quite long video of it, but
5 minutes into flight after continuing to this.
It is indeed quite a feat.
Engines, flip the vehicle.
So in any case, yeah, that was all of what I wanted to cover in this space brain. I would definitely recommend that if anyone watching is a space fanatic like I am. I am not an astronomer or a student of astronomy in any way. I just really love this stuff. So there might be some incorrect information in there or something that maybe I looked over that I shouldn't have. I know anyone who's actually a professional who's watching us here might be sort of shaking their head a little bit. So we definitely recommend that if anyone has any ideas or corrections or really just anything that you'd like to add to this brain, remove from this brain, things like that, feel free to email us at support@thebrain.com, and we'll be willing to just kind of take a look at that and add the information as necessary.
Great, thanks, Jay.
Yeah, Matt.
And, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and take presenter now.
All right.
And we're going to move from space into, let me see if I've got the right screen opened here. Stand by. Yes, there we are. Great. So we're going to move from space into the upper atmosphere of Earth and talk a little bit about the aviation brain. So this is the next brain that we wanted to share with you, and this particular brain was created by Chase Ingersoll. Chase is actually busy answering all of your questions right now in the GoToMeeting question panel. So Chase has shared his brain with me, shared it with the entire team actually. And but Chase has done the majority of the work because Chase actually is a pilot. And this information or this particular brain is really, truly content rich. And I hope I give you a good example of exactly all the work that Chase has put into this brain. And this particular brain, in a quick comparison between Chase's aviation brain and the space brain, none of us at the brain are astronauts. Jay and several other members of the brain team are really fascinated with everything that's going on with space exploration these days and all the advances that SpaceX is doing. Chase, however, walks the walk. He is a pilot, and a lot of this information that he has is his own experience and his knowledge. And so let me take you on a quick tour of parts of the brain that I particularly like. If you want to get started, maybe before you hop behind would you call it the wheel of an airplane, you might want to do some flight simulation. He's got so many resources here on different types of software and tools and utilities and flight simulators that exist out there, whether it's civilian or combat, that he likes, where you can download it, what you need to know about all of this information. It's all here. And then once it's time to start taking your classes or what have you, start looking into aircraft. Let me just take you into civil aircraft. He's really made a great use of all of the different types of zoomable icons. So obviously I'm not going to start flying a Boeing 747 or 737 right away, but it even gets into some very interesting types of airplanes. And when you find something you like, this looks like a decent starter model, Cessna 162. As you can see, there's a lot of history and additional information about this particular type of plane, or any plane that I were to click on in this brain. When production started of this particular aircraft, when production ended. You can even download the pilot's handbook and manual, so the PDF, as you can see, loads up right there in the content window, so I can easily navigate through that content. Or even, as Jay showed us earlier, we can load up a video, and I'll just fast forward to, this particular plane taking off and taking a little fly around Tampa Bay. And a lot of aviation videos. So a lot of just different types of planes, how they work, what they look like, and what they're useful for can be found in this particular area of this brain. But this brain also has wonderful, the history of flight. Aviation has been evolving since, gosh, I'm going to go right down to the Wright brothers, so I can learn more about, and there's a lot of content on the Wright brothers with their 1901 glider, or in 1899, introduced wing wrapping. What is wing warping? I don't even know what wing warping is, so I can actually click on the note he's got linked and takes me to the wing warping thought, which tells me a little bit more about how that's, controlling thrust or something like that. And just like I said, very content rich on sort of the the physics behind aviation. In fact, if I do a quick search, if I can spell physics, there it is, physics in aviation. You can see there's a lot of content down here. What is wind shear, vortex? What is a swept wing? And some of this I know a little bit about, obviously lift, ground effect, flight envelope, drag. So there's so much additional information about aviation, not just here's a bunch of types of planes, but here's exactly how they work. Here's why aviation works, the science behind it. Just absolutely fascinating. And then I'll jump over into innovations. So innovations all the way from just very early crude models, something that you probably wouldn't want to fly in. And the very next thing, alphabetical order, is the afterburner. So more recent innovations. And there was one particular, I really like the Concorde area. A lot of information about the innovation behind the Concorde, its history, sort of its downfall, the tragedies that happened with the Concorde, why that happened, and would it still happen? So he's doing a lot of research on that type of information as well. And that actually falls into, I believe, I thought I saw it down here, how to start up the Concorde. So you can even learn how to fly one. But regardless, he's got a lot of information here on adventures, places to go, and see if you're interested and passionate about aviation. You can take a look at some, trendy, the Oshkosh Air Show that people go to, the TWA Hotel in New York. More information, even scroll down, book tickets, and go and stay at the hotel and so forth. So just a really, really fascinating and fun brain. Like I said, content rich, and here's exactly what I mean by that. Typically, the brains that we create to share on specific topics, they could range anywhere from 50 thoughts to 100 or 200 thoughts. This particular brain, if you go into the reports for this brain, you'll see it has 776 thoughts, and each one of these thoughts is a flight manual, a video, notes, web links to further information, and so forth. A lot of content has gone into this particular brain. If I'm specifically looking through this brain for PDFs, for example, all right, I've got 776 thoughts in this brain. I want to find all thoughts with attachments and internal attachments specifically that are .pdf. And I'll refresh. So from 51 thoughts, well, there's one .pdf, internal PDF. I might have that because I know there's some more PDFs in this particular brain than that. But regardless, I had the date modified set up. So regardless, there's just a lot of great content in this brain. And again, this brain is available for you to download from the link that is at the very top of our website at www.thebrain.com. And I'm going to take you now into the last brain that we're demoing today. Going to sort of take you back down to earth and go into my electric cars brain. And let me take you on a little tour of this particular brain and talk about why I created this brain. This particular brain was created because I actually am car shopping. And originally this started out as just a car brain. I'm looking at Fords, Chevys, Volkswagens, just kind of seeing what's out there. I am in the market for a new car, and I quickly discovered, it's really time for me to start taking seriously the idea of getting an electric car. Personally, I think it's the way of the future. I love vintage cars. I love old cars. I've collected them in the past. And I'll always love old cars, even though they run on gas. But I think the right thing for me to do for my family eventually is to get an electric car. And so I wiped away everything that had to do with any other type of car that wasn't electric, and this specifically became the electric car brain. You can quickly get down into electric car manufacturers. This list is growing almost daily. Just the other day, I think it was Ford. Here I've got Ford. Originally, I just had the Mustang Mach-E. Now they've got the 150 Lightning. This car isn't available on the market yet, but I'm starting to collect some research about it. As you can see at the top of their page, they're just taking reservations at this point for this this particular type of car. So I can click through the different car manufacturers. These are the sort of standard manufacturers that are sort of the, you might say just the average person might be approaching. There's some very unique startups in this particular brain. So Fisker, for example, maybe not the car that would be, that would work for me or that is available yet. 37,000, not too bad. Lordstown Motors, I've got to add some new information about them. They're having trouble right now. Faraday Future, sort of a more expensive car, really expensive car actually, but they're in my brain. I really like this this vehicle, and so I'm going to collect some more information. Maybe they'll have something approachable in the future. And if I specifically want to know more about what cars I personally can afford, I've created in a note this falls under the economics of the why to buy an electric car, an incentive calculator. How much does it save me on my taxes? How much does maintenance cost? So I've got some research there. And here I'm just manually finding out as I do my research how much a new car of a particular model costs. And I started breaking this down by sort of economy, mid-range, and then high-end. If a new car comes along that is $200,000, so let's say I want to say, I'll just hit enter, add a new line to my table, and car X, $200,000. Just add this information in, and I can refer back to that at any time in case I win the lottery and I decide to buy car X. So this is all done with the tables and the notes. I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about this content, how it was all created here in just a moment. But I also want to share with you that on this particular note within my brain, I've actually linked all of the references to the actual car. There's a car that I really like called the Canoe. It's not available quite yet. You can see I've got a little availability area, but if I click, I can go over to the Canoe. Falls under the pickup trucks. Very innovative, very interesting. I really like it. They're only taking pre-orders. The reason why I first learned about this car is because they've actually created, if you ever live in LA, there's food trucks everywhere. And this is a company that decided, hey, how can we turn all food trucks electric? So they're making a crazy affordable electric food truck car. They're really sort of, that's their niche market. And then they decided, well, if we can get everyone that's driving a food truck to drive a car like this, let's introduce a car to just people that they can drive. And that's their pickup truck. So I've got some information in here about that particular company. And again, that falls under the EV startups, which also falls under the future of electric vehicles. And let me share with you another key area that I really like. It's not just about taking notes and adding web links. The web links can often be interactive within, anytime you're attaching a web page to a thought, you can actually continue on navigating and using your brain to just highlight areas of, the web that you're currently focused on. So under key technologies is an area where I'm keeping track of different types of batteries and manufacturing and so forth. And obviously, if you have an electric car, then charging is very important. Whether you are home charging, so I've got a list of different home chargers and what their ratings are, how well they work, how much they cost. Can you install them yourself? Do you need to hire a specialty electrician? Or if I just want to take my new electric car, which doesn't exist yet, I have not purchased one, by the way, and I say, all right, I'm going to be driving around LAX. So there's LAX airport. I'll zoom in. And now notice I'm just not focused on the Plex right now. I'm just focused in the content area. I can come down, zoom in on LAX. There are car chargers here. Let's say I'm going to be parking down the road a little bit at the Hilton. There's more information about the Hilton's chargers, how many they have available, 2 Tesla plugs, 1 EV plug. And if I can see the complete details, I'll click and find out more information, how much it costs, what I need to do, where I can park, and so forth about that particular car charger. And when I'm done, just come right back into my brain. So now we've shared with you really quickly, and I realize I went through that last part very, very quickly. Again, you can download these brains and take your time, pick them apart, add your own information. But I really want to share with you, some of the features that you've seen today, how we added that content into the brain. Now, first and foremost, I want to share with you that the Brain 101 class we hold just about every Friday. And the Brain 101 class will take you through all the basics of creating a brain, thought by thought, and adding content. I'm going to take a little bit more of an advanced approach right now. I'm assuming maybe you already know how to add thoughts and content. And I'm going to highlight some of the features that we used to do our research, and features that are going to be helpful to us, Jay and Chase and myself, and any of you that have downloaded these brains or are creating your own research brain over time. So first and foremost, I'm going to add a new thought. So let's say under technology, all about batteries, and I just want to research different types. So I'm going to click and drag off of the gate, that is the child gate, and type in, types. So different types of batteries that may be out there in the world. Now, let's talk about bringing content into the brain. I'll get into clicking and dragging from web pages in just a moment. But if you really want to get existing data into your brain very quickly, I want to speak with you about importing. There are different types of data sets that can be imported into the brain. If you want to know all about them, click on File and select Import, and you can sort of read through the different properly formatted, Excel spreadsheet or an existing FreeMind file. If you've downloaded a BRZ, the BRZs that we have available of these 3 brains, if you've downloaded one of those and want to use it locally, you would actually click on File, Import, and import a BRZ, either as a new brain or into an existing brain. Let's say you've already got a car's brain started, and now you want this brain to be sort of a branch in your car's brain, all about electric vehicles. Then you would download the BRZ from our website and import that BRZ into the currently open brain. But for this example, I'm actually going to open up, I've created, if I can find it, there it is. I've actually created a sort of outline that I found that's just really all about, there it is, electric motors. And I just want to show you really quickly how you can add information properly in a properly formatted outline. So here, common electric motor types. So now I'm really getting into the nitty-gritty of electric motors, how they work, the different types there are. Maybe I'm an engineer, and all the electric car motors that are out there today are great, but I want to take it one step further. So I'm going to look at all the existing technology and find out what's going to be working best for my design. Squirrel cage. I don't know much about a squirrel cage induction motor, but it rings a bell. I know there are 3 different phases to a squirrel cage. So I'm just going to hit a tab. So under squirrel cage, I'll have phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. So under each thought, if I create a tab, I'm creating a new generation. So child thoughts underneath squirrel cage, which falls under AC induction motor. If phase 1 is sort of my favorite and I want to have some notes, I'm going to hit enter and add a dash. So there's some special characters you can add. A plus sign will add a link to a web page. A pipe symbol will add a label to a thought. A dash will add a note. This is the most important part. There, so I've modified my list a little bit. You can see it's a tab delineated list. Now, if were a Word document, I could save it and click on File, Import, and select to import a Word. In this case, I'm just going to copy this content to my clipboard. I right click, I copy, and in my brain, I right click and I paste this text outline. So as you can see, the very starting line that was in that document, common electric motor types. Here's my AC induction motors, my squirrel cage. I've got 3 phases, 1, 2, and 3. And as you can see on phase 1, this is the most important part. So there really quickly, I have populated an area of my brain with just a quick copy and paste of an existing tab delineated sort of outline and populated an area of my brain. Sort of a more advanced feature of the brain, but if you're setting up and doing a lot of innovative research, you know, maybe you've got an outline of a book you're writing or a book you're reading, class you're taking, you can populate areas of your brain with that type of feature very, very quickly. Let's get into also talking about, you know, all these interactive web pages. Adding web pages into the brain is a really, really simple process. If you've got an existing web page, and here I've got one for the Model X Plaid, which I do not yet have in my brain, I don't believe. So under Tesla, I do have it. So I'm going to actually delete it. I'm going to right click and forget that thought, just so you can see how I'm bringing this into the brain. There it is, the Model X Plaid, an existing web page open in my browser. I'm simply going to click the icon in the address bar and drag that right into the brain. So I add that Model X, and it loads that content up right there in my brain. So drag and drop web pages. You know, a lot of the thoughts that you saw in Jay's brain and Chase's Aviation Brain and in mine, they were created that way. You were creating thought by thought and just simply dragging and dropping content. When we see content we like, so here's the Model S Plaid. So, but it's still Plaid related. So I'm going to actually just drag and drop that right down there into the brain. So drag and drop, easy way to get content into your brain. But there's also another way that I wanted to share with you today, and that is through BrainBox. BrainBox is a way to collect information, send it into your brain, and then categorize it at a later date. So when I find a web page I like, and let's say I don't even have the electric car brain open right now. So I'm browsing around through the web, and I find out that, wait a minute, they just took the S Plaid up Pikes Peak. That's fascinating. I want to know a lot more about that. I'm going to read this article and refer back to it later. So I don't have the brain open. I'd have to open the brain. I'd have to open the correct brain database, navigate to the right area before I do my drag and drop. I'm in a big, big hurry. So with this particular thought, as you can see, I have a BrainBox icon appearing. I use Google Chrome. So this is a Chrome extension. You can go to our website and just do a quick search for BrainBox, or go to thebrain.com/BrainBox to learn more about how to get the BrainBox extension or bookmarklet into your favorite browser. I've got it there, so all I need to do is click. Now I'm not logged in. I actually purposely logged out to share with you that you do need to be logged in so that the BrainBox knows what account to send this link to. So my username and my password. I'll log in, and I've added this web page directly into my BrainBox. I'll do one more. Here's an article that I really like, and I'll click to add that to my BrainBox. I'm logged in now, so it doesn't ask me where I want to, or what account I want to log into. So now when I return to the brain, I've got some time. I go into my list of available brains, and there's my electric cars brain. I can open up, and I'm going to create a new thought for Model S. And I've got those articles about the Model S Plaid. Those are in my BrainBox. If I click on the BrainBox icon, and they're just refreshed in the background for me, but there's that Motor Trend article, and here is watching the Tesla Model S Plaid go up Pikes Peak. And I want to add these two as child thoughts. So the little plus sign that appears, create a child thought underneath the current active thought. It's no longer in my brain box. It's been added down into my brain. And one last, or a couple of final components before we get into the QA. You noticed a lot of Jay's thoughts had zoomable thought icons, and I saw some questions came up about our zoomable thought icons. This brain doesn't have too many of, there's a one for Cybertruck. Jay's brain has quite a few of those because you want to see a picture of that rocket or the outcome of the rocket. In this brain, I'm sure over time I want to see a picture of each individual car or component in an electric motor and so forth. So for Model S, rather than grabbing a picture of the Model S, since I'm specifically talking about the Model S Plaid, and in case you don't know about the Plaid is sort of, you know, the newest advancement for Tesla motors. It's all about the speed of the car. And if any of you are familiar with the movie Spaceballs, sort of a silly movie that came out probably in the 80s or 90s, instead of just going into hyperspace, they could go faster than hyperspace. And I think it went something like ridiculous, ludicrous, and faster than ludicrous was simply Plaid. So sort of a goofy little reference, but if you know anything about Elon Musk, he likes to give some of his products very interesting names. So Plaid is a reference to the speed of the car. And since it's a sort of a spin-off of Spaceballs, I've got a picture from Spaceballs on my desktop. So when I click on a thought, I'm opening up the thought properties display. And I can click on the little box next to that to select a stock icon. We have over 2,000 stock icons in the brain. I'm going to select a file because I have an image that I selected just for today's webinar. There it is, Rick Moranis, and making a reference to the Model S Plaid. So a zoomable icon there, just adding a little bit of levity to today's topic and to this particular thought. Those of you on the inside of Tesla and Plaid will get the joke. So I'll probably use quite a few references to Spaceballs in this area of my brain. But regardless, that's how you can add those zoomable icons into the brain. And you also saw, I think Jay gave a great example of how he could add labels, link labels between thoughts. But just really quickly, once again, you can see that I can double click on a link between two thoughts to further define their relationship. And that's really a key ingredient in the brain, something that you can't do if you're storing all of your, your innovative research in files and folders. Why does folder X reside inside folder A? It's a subcategory. We don't really particularly know. But if there is a reference, let's say this, the Model S going up Pikes Peak was used for testing, but I like to have this testing reference. Here's a live test versus lab test, or just a hypothetical test on a computer simulation. This was a live test of how well the Plaid S works, and so therefore I just want to add a label, live test. And if I find another reference on on a computer simulated how fast we think this car could go, it's a simulated test. So I want to know the difference between the two. So live test, and I'll actually just change the color code there to green, and actually just make it a larger font so it really stands out. So I'll know here's how it performed in a live test, and I can read more about that article. So you'll find in your research and these different sample brains, different areas and times that we utilized the different link labels between thoughts. And finally, the last component that I wanted to share are thought types and tags. Thought types and tags are ways to add extra attributes to a thought, or classifications to a thought. You saw many of them being used. I think Jay had different rockets that were launched from Japan or Israel, Russia, the US, and so forth. So you have a little bit of additional reference. So this Model S Plaid I don't know the price point off the top of my head, but I can imagine it is going to be expensive and probably not something that's in my budget. But regardless, I am going to click and create a thought type. Now I don't have any thought types created yet, but I'm going to assign a new thought type just called expensive. So that is a new thought type. And all of the different cars that I find that are expensive, I'll give them this expensive thought type. Some expensive cars I'm interested in, others I'm not. And so that's a smaller attribute, whether or not I'm interested in the car, or if I've ever ridden in the car, seen the car, whatever the case may be. But for those, I'm going to add a tag, and I'm going to say interested. So I don't need a real zoomy looking race car, but the Plaid S, you know, it looks like it's you know, a decent looking, I don't know what you'd call that, a smaller SUV, something like that. I'm sort of interested. Those faster race cars and I've got a couple of electric race cars in here that really look like a souped up Ferrari or Maserati. I'm not interested in those. But this is one I'm interested in, and another car that I'm interested in. Let's just do my search for Canoe. Since I know I really like the Canoe pickup truck. So this one I am also interested in. So I'll tag that as being interested, and I'll type this as inexpensive. So what does that accomplish for me? Yes, when I'm on the thought, I can hover over and, you know, see that this is an I'm interested in this pickup truck and it is inexpensive, but I can also run reports on my data. Remember earlier that I mentioned, you know, I can run a report to find out. Now this is a brain that I've just started creating, not too large. If I refresh, I can see I've got just over 100 thoughts, 171 thoughts. But now I want to say, all right, show me all thoughts that are my cars that are inexpensive. There's only one so far. If I find another one, let's say the Ford F-150 is affordable. And so we'll type that as inexpensive. But notice don't tag that as a car that I'm interested in. So if I say, show me, let me just refresh, all my inexpensive cars, there are 2 inexpensive cars that I am particularly interested in. There's only one, and that is the Canoe pickup truck. So I can utilize these filters within the reports to, even in a very, very large brain, to sort of pinpoint information that I've recently modified. You saw earlier I was on the date modified. So I'm only looking at recently modified data within the last week, last month, what have you. In this case, I'm filtering by thought types and tags, looking for inexpensive cars that I'm currently interested in. So I can actually go back in a very, very large brain and sort of peruse through my data to find key pieces of information that I'm currently focused on with the reporting feature. So with that, we've taken a look at the thought types, tags, zoomable icons, adding content in 3 different varieties of brain here on Earth, out in the air, or all the way up in space. I think, Jay, with that, let's go ahead and now we're just at the hour. Let's go into the QA, see if anyone has any questions for us. I'd be happy to demo, Jay, anything here in the car or aviation brain, or I can send it back to you in the space brain, depending on what our questions have been while I've been demoing.
Yeah. So first, I should say there were a few comments that my voice was not maybe coming through clearly enough, probably because of the mic that I'm using. So I'm just gonna try to get as close as possible to this mic here.
All right.
But we did have a few questions. I mean, Chase has been really good to answer most of these questions. So just a couple here that we can go over, since we are a little bit short on time as well. So I guess this first one I can sort of answer. I can start, and you can sort of answer as well. So it's a question about when to use thoughts and when to use the content section.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm assuming this came up mainly because of my brain, which makes use of the Plex a lot. And I will say, when I was creating that brain, really the thought process that I had there was just that if it's information that I can put in the Plex, I'll put it in a Plex, and then everything else will go in the content section. So, you know, like the title of an article, for example, would be my thoughts name. And then maybe if there's a key point in that article that can be summed up in 2 words or something like that, then maybe I'll create a tag or use a thought label to put that key information in the Plex as well. But if the key information is 2 sentences long, then I'll include that in the set content section. So it really just depends on what you're working on at the time and how well you can sort of, I guess, sort of show the key information for that title in the Plex. And if it's getting too convoluted where you're typing in an entire sentence into a thought label, or you're creating a tag that seems way too long, then that should be information included in the content section. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. Like, this is the example, you know, a full sentence, watch the, you know, modded a Tesla Model S plaid fly up Pikes Peak. I'm happy with renaming this to simply Pikes Peak. You know, it's already about the Tesla Model S, a live test on Pikes Peak. And then the content area is the actual article itself. So the content area gets into how they modified the car, how many horsepower it had, how it performed, who was driving, who was there. So all of the details in the full article in the content area. And I like to keep my thought names as short and concise as possible. But this tells me everything I need to know. Model S Plaid, it is a Tesla, and they did a live test on Pikes Peak. That's exactly what I need to know. How did that test go? I'm going to click and read through the article in the content area. And if there's something in the content area that I particularly like, let's say, you know, I didn't even get into it. There's a whole area of TheBrain where you can actually take a vintage car and build your own electric car. And it talks about what components you need from the original car and how to take the engine out and what type of electric batteries and things to put in. And if I find that no matter what, I want 3 motors with 120 horsepower, I'm going to copy that and, you know, things I need. So I'm just extracting all of the data. You know, think of that as sort of highlighting when you used to study in college for a midterm or for an exam, and you'd go through and highlight just key lines, areas, names, words that are really, really important. Quite often I'm copying and pasting that content. So there's multiple pieces of content in the notes. There's the full article, and then the components of the article that are really important to me, I'll paste those into the notes as I'm reading through.
Great, yeah, great answer. Okay, so another question that we got was, do you outline structures and features you plan to use before building the brain? Or do you just sort of go with the flow?
I typically don't. I'll let you answer that too. I'll start. I typically do not. It's free flowing. And like I said, TheBrain started out as something completely different. TheBrain started off as my car research brain, and I was just researching new cars. And the more and more I looked into it, I decided, wow, I really want to get an electric car. That's the right path. And so I stripped out everything else. I deleted a lot of content out of TheBrain and started focusing just on electric cars, and then added on all of the components about how to build your own electric car, how to, you know, how batteries work, where charging stations are, the science behind it, the history behind electric cars is all in here as well. And those things I wouldn't have known about until I was, you know, knee deep into the data. You know, I didn't even think about adding, and if I look in here at 19, you know, the sort of history of electric cars is all in here as well. It's interesting that Jay, Chase, and myself, we all added sort of these linear timelines of history of electric cars. And none of this information would have been in here if I just sat down on a piece of paper and made an outline of the type of car that I wanted to buy. But now I'm sort of wrapped up into it. I'm fascinated with electric engines, electric cars, the history and the future. And so this brain is evolving over time.
Yes, I would agree with that as well, especially with the space brain. I think we actually started that brain as like human exploration in space or innovation in space. It was something focusing on technology and technology in space. But I just thought it would be much cooler to sort of just build out like a model of the solar system in the Plex and then include that information in there such that you're not just entering this brain, seeing a bunch of information about technologies that you probably don't know or don't care about unless you're
Yeah.
really into that stuff. You're looking at it thinking, oh, wow, this is Earth, this is cool, this is Mars, and things like that, things that you know. And then you can further dive in, like, oh, this is a mission to Mars, and oh, this is the technology that was used, this is the type of rocket that was used. So that wasn't clear right off the bat. And in most cases, I assume that when you're putting together a brain, it won't be clear right off the bat how you should, what features you should use, maybe even sometimes how you should structure it. But
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
said before my presentation, if you have enough information, how you should structure it might come to you a bit quicker. But as far as what features to use, that will almost always be like a go with the flow type of situation.
Absolutely. And I think we should mention too, Jay, that all of these brains, the three brains you've seen today, where Jay has placed the majority of the content in the space brain, Chase certainly in aviation, myself content in the electric cars brain. We're actually sharing these brains. You can, there are different license types that you can acquire for the brain, whether you're just a free license user, pro combo, all the way up to team brain, where multiple people are collaborating in the same brain databases. I've put some information into Jay's space brain, and then he's organized where it should belong or how it should get linked. Um, Jay actually came to me and with the information about Tesla Plaid, like you've got to get some Plaid information into your electric car brain. So, he's contributing into mine. I'm contributing into his brain. It's over time a bit collaborative, and I welcome. I've shared this brain with other people at the Brain Technologies, and I welcome their input and their additional information. I'm learning from their info that they're adding into my brain. So that's with Team Brain. If you want to know more about Team Brain, there's information on our website, or send us a note, support@thebrain.com. How can my team get started doing their research, in the brain? And it's so important now more than ever with so many of us working remotely these days and in different locations. Team Brain has really been a wonderful, wonderful tool for distant collaborative work.
Great, great. So we had another question about zoomable icons, but you already talked about that. And I just wanted to quickly say that there isn't anything special that we're doing there. For most of those icons, I just right-clicked on an image in Google and copied it. And once you have an image in your clipboard and you right-click on a thought in the brain, you'll get a command that says paste icon. And you can just paste the icon there. You can also just open the thought property dialog and paste the icon using that if you're familiar with that method. So yeah, the icons themselves are not anything special we're doing. Yeah, so what Matt's doing here, it's just any image and we just make it the icon for the thought. And whenever you hover over a thought like that, the icon will become zoomable. So that's sort of just like the brain feature.
And the capture image that's there, if you're familiar with Snagit, if I open up here, let me, open this up in its own browser. If I find an image, I'm just going to scroll down. Here's the logo of the EV1. So I've got that image open in the background behind the brain. And if I click to open up thought properties and select to capture an image, the brain will minimize. I can hit tab if I want to bring it back and take a brain screenshot. But here you can see I've got a little crosshair. I click and drag, and that is going to be the zoomable icon for that particular thought.
All right, great. I think that was pretty much most of the questions that we got there. Someone did say that they were new to the brain and they were asking what the plex is. I think because I mentioned the plex several times.
Yeah.
So the plex is simply just the area where your thoughts are laid out. So yeah, what Matt is highlighting there is just the plex, which is just the left side of the left main panel. And then the right main panel. So to lead into the next question, which was what's the difference between a contents area and the notes area? So the right panel that you can see on Matt's in the brain on Matt's screen here, that's the content section as a whole. That can hold attachments, so file attachments, URL attachments. It can, and then a type of an attachment would be, the notes. So really, when we say content area, we're referring to all of that as a whole. It could be your notes, it could be your attachments, it could be anything, but anything that's in that right panel, that content section.
And that's something, yeah, that I always cover on Brain 101. Please feel, if you are new to the brain, don't be discouraged with some more advanced features. I mean, I jumped right into importing, tab delineated outlines and so forth today. Please join us for a Brain 101 on Friday, or write into us, support@thebrain.com. We'll be happy to answer those questions, help you get started. We've got so many helpful resources available on our website, so you can start there. But the Brain 101 is a really great starting point if you're just getting started with the brain. 1 hour class, and I go through just the basics: creating a thought, adding a note, adding a file attachment. And these are all highly adjustable. Jay mentioned that the Plex is over on the left. It's over on the left currently. However, if I were to start manipulating the tool, I can really make the brain work for my environment. I can flip-flop to an over-under view. I'm in dark mode of the brain right now. I can go to light mode. I can change the wallpaper. There's a lot of ways that you can change the application to work best for you, for your environment. No two brains think alike. And therefore, we make the application highly adjustable to fit your process.
All right, great. So I just had one question left for you, Matt, which was, now that you have all this information about electric cars, you're going to buy one?
I hope so. I don't know if you probably heard me mention it a couple of times, but there it is. That's the dream car right there. I'm going to be adding a lot more information on this particular car, but sort of that's the dream. And when that happens, we'll have another webinar, and I'll do the webinar from my iPhone in my canoe.
Perfect. All right.
And Jay, this question just came in. When do you launch? When are you going to Mars?
When am I going to Mars?
Yeah.
Well, right now, seeing that that's only available for billionaires, I would say when I make my first billion.
Okay, there we go. In Jay's Brain, if you download Jay's Brain, there's an area for space tourism, and you can see, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, where the Blue Origin, how you can sign up, and SpaceX, and all the different ways that you can actually get into space. Those links are there and ready for you to research. Huh?
Just make sure you got a big check ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. Today's webinar was a lot of fun just because these brains are so personal to us. But once again, you can download them from our website. There's a link at the top of the webpage, thebrain.com. You'll also receive an email with a recording of today's webinar and links to download as well. And we're always available for you at support@thebrain.com if you have any questions in the future. So thanks everyone for joining us. Have a great day and enjoy your brain.